Hello, my name is John Perry, and this is my little strategy card game, Air, Land, and Sea. Plays 2 players in about 20 minutes. Real quick, I initially designed this game to play with my wife so that we would have a game that was portable, that we could bring with us on a trip out to a restaurant or bar and play easily, but that would still have some strategic depth, and in fact, we still play this game regularly today. So if that sounds like something you could use in your life, I hope you will enjoy it. As you can see, it's got a war theme. That simply comes from the fact of the old expression, lose the battle to win the war, which is relevant to how the game plays, which I'm going to get into right now. In Air, Land, and Sea, you play the role of supreme commander of your nation's military, and your goal is to win the war by earning 12 victory points before your opponent. Victory points are won in individual battles, and battles are won by winning 2 out of 3 theaters of war: air, land, and sea. Begin by placing the 3 theater boards in a random order in the center of the table. Next, you're going to locate and shuffle the 18 battle cards. Deal 6 battle cards to each player. Place the rest of the deck to one side of the line of theaters. Finally, mix up the 2 Supreme Commander cards and give 1 to each player. Players will then reveal simultaneously and discover whether they are the first player or the second player. Beginning with the first player, you're going to look at your hand and decide between one of 3 actions that you can choose to take on your turn. The first action you can take is to deploy, and deploy means you take a card from your hand and you place it in its matching theater. So since this is an air card, it goes in the air theater. This now gives me 6 strength towards controlling this theater. Now when I deploy a card, many of those cards are going to have what's called tactical abilities written on them, and those take effect immediately. For example, this is an ongoing tactical ability, showed by the infinity symbol, that gives me +3 strength in each adjacent theater, and those would be the theaters immediately to the right and to the left. Alternatively, this card, when deployed face up, has an instant ability, which is a one-time effect, which allows me to flip a battle card in an adjacent theater. So for example, take my opponent's 5 and flip it down to only a 2. The second action you can take on your turn is to improvise, and that means you take a card and you play it face down, and the benefit is you can now play it to any theater you want, essentially as a wild. Of course, the downside is it's only worth 2 and it gets no tactical abilities. The third and final action you can take is to withdraw. Let's say you decide, wow, there's no way that I can possibly win this battle at this point. Well then, I can consult my Supreme Commander card and see that if I were to withdraw now, I have 2 cards left in my hand, that I'm only going to give my opponent 3 points. Whereas if I wait a turn until I have 1 card left in my hand, I'm going to give them 4 points. So essentially, if you think you're going to lose, you want to withdraw sooner rather than later to deny your opponent more points. Now, if either player decides to withdraw at some point, then the battle will end early. But let's suppose that both players decide to stick it out till the bitter end. Well, in that case, it will come down to who controls 2 out of 3 of these theaters. Right now, my opponent has 6 in the sea, however, I have 7, so I'm winning or controlling the sea. In air, my opponent has 9, whereas I only have 8, so my opponent is controlling the air. In land, my opponent has 3, I also have 3. Now, in that case, the tie is going to break in favor of the first player, which happens to be me. So I would overall win that battle and earn 6 points in the process. To set up the next battle, first we're going to collect all the battle cards, shuffle them, and deal a new hand of 6 cards to each player. Then we're going to rotate the position of these theater boards, like so, sliding over. And then lastly, we're going to take the 2 Supreme Commander cards and we're going to trade them between the 2 players so that the first player is now second player and vice versa. And now we're ready to continue into the next battle. Battles will continue back and forth until one player has at least 12 victory points, and that player is the winner of the war. There are 13 unique tactical abilities in the game, and I'm not going to discuss all of them, but there are a couple key points. For example, many tactical abilities allow you to flip a card, and it's important to know, first of all, that you can always flip either your opponent's or your own, and both might be good in different situations. So for example, I could flip my own card here, which is now face down. When I do that, you'll notice all of a sudden I have an air card in the land, And actually, that's okay. Even though you can't deploy cards that don't match their theater, if you manage to get a card that's mismatched to its theater in by some tricky way using a tactical ability, that is totally acceptable, and now I've got 6 points in the land. The other really important thing to keep in mind about flipping is that I cannot flip what is called a covered card. Now you see my opponent has a 2 and a 6 here. Now I would love to flip this 6 because it's powerful, but I actually can't because see how it's covered by this 2 that was played after it? So I can legally only flip the 2 because the 6 is covered. Another important detail about tactical abilities is they become immediately inactive when they're flipped face down. So while this one gives me a great ability, all of my face down battle cards are worth 4, if my opponent flips it face down, well sorry, I don't have that ability anymore. If I can flip it face up again, it will reactivate, however. Interesting chain reactions can sometimes happen when cards are flipped face up. So for example, when I play this maneuver, I can flip a card in an adjacent theater. Now let's say I flip this one face up. Well, its tactical ability becomes active, and it will actually trigger the second this card is exposed, allowing me to move one of my battle cards to an adjacent theater. So let's say now I might take this card over here and move it here. So now you know all you need to start playing Air, Land, and Sea right away. Remember, if you encounter small details that I didn't discuss here, you can always consult the rulebook.